Today I'm going to talk about exercise number 12 from Dohnányi's essential finger exercises. I really like this exercise. I think it's very helpful. I've practiced it for years and I have assigned it to my students frequently as well. And in fact, I mentioned it in my video about weight transfer when I talk about dropping and hoisting your weight in and out of the keyboard. This is an exercise that practices dropping into the keys and having sharp accents and releasing on the notes that are not accented. What this exercise is basically it's a 5-note pattern that is repeated over 4 notes, and therefore it is a displaced accent that shifts from one part of the pattern to the next from beat to beat. The pattern goes major, minor, diminished, so it's basically major, minor, and then diminished. The hands go in contrary motion, and it alternates between the hands starting on 5 and then coming up toward the 5th finger, and then shifting the opposite direction starting on the thumb and coming in from the 5th finger to the thumb. All right, so that's kind of the basic setup of the exercise. My suggestion to you, before you just sit down and play it through, is get comfortable with this pattern of major, minor, diminished. And so you can just practice 5-finger patterns like this. And then again. And you can then do the opposite. You can go major, minor, diminished, right? And then going through the keys, minor, diminished. So getting really comfortable with just the feeling of doing a 5-finger pattern in major and minor and diminished. Now, Dohnányi starts on B flat and he goes through all the keys to G major. Now, why does he do that, you might wonder? Well, it turns out if you start on B flat and you go all the way through to G major, you will have covered every possible combination of white key and black key within each 5-finger pattern. And so if he included all the other keys, it would just be repeating that. So he didn't want to waste anybody's time with this. What this exercise practices is the experience of dropping weight and releasing weight, dropping weight and releasing weight, over and over and over on every possible finger, on every possible black key, white key combination. And the fact that it shifts from one finger to the next really helps you develop coordination. So what you want to look for when you're practicing this is to have a strong impulse to drop in on the accented notes and then to release on the other 3 fingers between the accent. So we're going to drop in here on 5, and then on 1, 2, 3, I'm going to release, and then I'm going to drop again on 4, because that's the accent, and then release, and then I'm going to drop again there. Right? So what you want to look for is at the bottom of the dropping motion, feel that connect with the precise point that the hammer hits the string. So the bottom of the key and the bottom of the motion should feel the same. And you can tell, because if you're going like, right, or what I did was I pressed the key down and then I dropped with my wrist, or if you do the opposite, you go with your wrist and then you play, you'll feel that that coordination is not synchronized. So really working on having synchronized coordination for the accents is important. If you practice this exercise well and carefully, you will find that it helps you gain coordination and it will help you gain facility in terms of dropping your weight in the keys and releasing. Here's how I recommend learning this exercise. First of all, memorize it. It's very easy. It's just major, like I said, minor, diminished. Same thing. So first of all, practice going through all the keys with major, minor, diminished, getting really comfortable with those 5-finger patterns. Then the next thing I would do is practice it always in the same direction. So that means I would start on 5 and then practice always just really feeling the fingers from 5 to 1 and then back out to 5. Get really, really comfortable with that. Just practice that in B flat, practice that in C, practice that in D, practice that in different keys. And then once you're comfortable with the mirrored pattern where you start on 5 and you go back out to 5, then do the reverse. Start on the thumb and then go to 5 and back toward the thumb. Because I found that with my students, when they learn this, they find it a little bit tricky that it starts in one direction and then every other key it shifts to the opposite direction. So giving that some practice time will help you in your preparation for this. All right, now you've memorized the pattern. You have gotten comfortable with hands together with the contrary motion pattern. The next thing to do is actually practice it. You want to add the accents slowly and really overemphasize them at first. We're really going to want to go for accents being forte and then the non-accented notes being piano. And then accent and then accent. Now, when I'm doing that, I'm exaggerating my motions, and that's the way I suggest practicing this as well. Because in order to get comfortable with a new motion at the piano, it's good to exaggerate it and then to rein it in as you get comfortable with it. And so you'll notice what I'm doing is I'm starting with a higher wrist, my wrist is elevated, and then I drop in, and then my wrist is lower. And then on the next 3 notes, I'm lifting my wrist at intervals, and it's almost like I'm hoisting up a third of the way each note. So drop all the way, drop to the bottom, and then hoist, hoist, hoist. Now I'm at the high place again, and then I drop here. Drop all the way, and then hoist, 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 drop, hoist, 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 drop, etc. Right? And so what I'm doing is I'm practicing the dropping motion regardless of what finger I'm playing. The problem that a lot of students have with a piece like this, and this is why this exercise is helpful, is that a lot of people just drop automatically whenever they play their thumb. And so what you might find as you're practicing this is that if you're intentionally dropping here, then it's going to be hard to lift your wrist on your thumb because you're used to dropping on your thumb. This exercise helps undo that habit of always dropping with your wrist to play your thumb. You should play your thumb like from the hand, like a finger. And so here I'm lifting with the wrist, and so my thumb should not be fighting that. I should just play the thumb like a finger and drop and drop. Another thing you want to watch out for when you're practicing this is that this is really focusing on an up and down motion. That's what we're practicing here, moving the wrist this way. And so you want to avoid lateral motions this way. And so we want to focus on keeping the fingers aligned with the keys and the arm lined up behind the finger all the way up. So in other words, you play the 5th finger and then don't twist to play the thumb. Don't come in like this, but keep everything aligned and just come in a little bit to get to the thumb on the black key. And then here, we're going to just drop straight down and not twist. We're not going to go out like this to play 5. We're just playing this and then up. After you've practiced it that way for a while and get really comfortable with just playing it slowly at a steady tempo where you're accenting and then lifting out with the wrist, accent, lift out with the wrist, accent, lift out with the wrist, moving up and down and not laterally, then you can start increasing the tempo. And as you increase the tempo, the wrist motion will get smaller and smaller. Because obviously you're not going to play a piece like this really fast and go, right? Those motions are way, way, way too big. And so what's going to happen as you play it faster is you will refine this motion and it will become almost invisible. You'll know it's happening. You will feel it releasing. You will feel your fingers releasing as you, but it won't be this giant wrist motion. One really important point I want to bring up is that when you have the hoist fingers, when you are lifting your weight out of the keys, make sure you're actually releasing with the fingers and not just pushing and playing quieter. In other words, what I sometimes see with students is they drop, they move their wrist down, right? And they see that it's a dropping motion, but they're not actually dropping weight in. They're just moving their wrist because they see that I do that and they think they just have to mimic the motion. But you got to drop in and feel the weight of your arm just loose. You know, we practiced the hanging arm, we practiced having a loose arm. Well, this is where you can't hold all this weight up by contracting these muscles, but instead have a loose arm from the shoulder, drop, and then on the notes that are not accented, your finger, the palm of your hand should feel loose. Your thumb should feel loose and not all tight in here. So play here, and then loose fingers, right? And then drop. I'm going to demonstrate a playthrough of it all the way from B flat to G as written. This is so that you can see what I'm talking about. A lot of times it's easy to just talk about things and describe them, but that you can see and hear this exercise played in its entirety. My next video is going to be about Dohnányi's exercise number 22 from Essential Finger Exercises. This is part of my series where I'm exploring the 8 exercises from that book that I practice and that I assign to my students. I'll see you there, and happy practicing!